Welcome to the QB Room. Brand new week, brand new episode. This, like every week, is brought to you by Happy Dad. And we're going to dive deep. Kyle, I'm pretty fired up about this discussion today.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a really interesting discussion about just the overall landscape of college football quarterbacks right now and just quarterbacking in general. And I think how it trickles up from high school to quarterback to the NFL. But the landscape of transferring coaches, NIL, conference realignment, I think quarterback is at one of the craziest points it's ever been at in the history of football right now. So we're going to dive into it. But first, if you haven't subscribed yet and you love our show, subscribe. Please, subscribing helps us. Click the subscribe button. Watch us every week. We're putting out great stuff. We're trying to get you the best show every week. We love our fans. We love to interact with you guys. So appreciate you watching if you're here. I'm really excited to get into this episode. And I think when we think about the quarterback problem itself, we've talked about this a lot, but I think it splits up into a couple different issues, a couple very different issues, but kind of the same. They all bleed into each other. But I think there's 3 or 4 really, really important issues to talk through. And the first one that I don't think a lot of people think about, and I didn't really think about it until I heard Joel Klatt talk about it. And we love Joel Klatt on this show. I think he's one of the smartest people in it. But the first main issue is a scheduling issue in college football in general. When you think about the scheduling, I'm not talking about the games or the conference championships. It's the recruiting schedule. It's the bowl games. It's free agency now, the transfer period. They all kind of happen at the same time. And I know you, Jordan, you're having guys hit you up constantly about this right now. It's December. A lot of guys are looking for new schools. You can probably speak better to this on everybody, but you're dealing with high school guys hitting you up from Elite 11. Where am I supposed to go, especially with the early signing period now? You're dealing with guys who are transferring out from bowl games, and then you're dealing with college coaches probably hearing about recruiting as well.
Yeah, and quarterbacks. There's guys that are maybe going to play in the bowl game and hop in the portal after, or bypass the bowl game altogether and jump in the portal right now. Some of them have already signed. Some of them are weighing their options. I've been on the phone a lot this month, more than I typically am. But I mean, zooming out, it's pretty crazy. If you want like a quick summary on the current state of college football, it's unrestricted free agency with no cap and no trade deadline. So like put it in NFL terms, right? The NFL has a trade deadline past March, whatever. You can't trade anybody to make the game fair. Plus every team in the NFL only has so much money they can spend on their players before they get into signing bonuses. That's again, to keep it fair. And then there's, you can't just like say, I want out of my contract, you know what I mean? And I'm just going to leave and go over there. Like, well, no, you're under contract here. You have to be traded if you want to go play for that team. And so if you put it in NFL, like terminology, it's unrestricted, no cap, and there is no trade deadline. And it's bananas. And the scheduling, I mean, you're spot on. I mean, you got the college football playoffs happening, plus bowl games, whether they're meaningful or not, plus the portal just opened up. Mm-hmm. Plus also you got coaches hopping around, right? Like my alma mater, UTEP, they fired their coach. They got a new coach. That coach has to recruit the players to stay, not get in the portal, get some new players out of the portal, sign some high school guys, potentially go JUCO, and hire a staff. Like that's all happening right now. And at some point, it's got to install a new offense, new defense, and new special teams to get to know his roster, right? And so it's just, and it's Christmas too, right? So like there's just so many things happening when I think about the scheduling issue. And like you said, we're not talking about who you play week 4. We're talking about December and January is bananas. And I mean, largely this is how you're setting your team up for the year.
I know. And I think it's super interesting. And whenever I think about this, right, and I was just having a conversation with my OC about this today, it's always interesting to think about it from both perspectives. It's the player perspective, the high school kid or the young college kid who's either transferring or trying to figure out what he's trying to do with his life. And then it's also the coach's perspective. So let's start with the coach's perspective, right? You kind of laid it out a little bit already, but when you're thinking about what a coach has to do during this scheduling time, and I've talked to some college coaches that I know and have played for right now, right? Like if you're in this 5-week period right now, like you are constantly having to do something involving recruiting, right? You're trying to figure out if your starting quarterback is going to be on your team this year, right? You could get a call tomorrow and say, hey, coach, Jim here. I'm not staying this year. I know I started free all year, but I'm going to try and go somewhere else, right? And that's your president of your franchise, right? When they say the quarterback in the NFL is the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, it's a similar thing in college,
Same
right?
thing in college.
Yeah. And so you're thinking about that. And then as a coach, right, you're on the road recruiting, right? I got to go find this quarterback. I got to find, like, now I got to figure out the transfer portal. Who's transferring in? Who's in there? What guys are we even looking for? So when guys are coming to you, right, from a coaching perspective, have you been talking to many coaches at all through this, or has it been mostly players?
Yeah, and here's a good take on coaches. They say now all of a sudden they have to recruit 3 different things. You used to have to recruit high school players, right? And junior college players, right? And then there's always been a portal. So, but it was just like limited. It was grad transfers or stuff like that, or dudes who got a medical thing. So you really recruit in like high school. And if some schools don't recruit junior college players, so maybe you're just recruiting high school. So now you have to recruit 3 things. You have to recruit high school, and I'll put high school and JUCO in the same one. So you have to recruit players who haven't played in college yet. You have to recruit in the portal, and you have to recruit your own team to stay, to not enter the portal.
Right.
Right. And so just picture.
That comes on my head when you're thinking about that. Like, you got to recruit your guys to stay. Think about the way as a coach you have to be interacting with your players all year.
You have to be like
right?
coddling them.
Right.
And
it's
like complimenting them.
I'm worried to coach you hard, or maybe something like the best coaches are probably saying, fuck it. Like, I'm going to coach you the way I'm going to coach you. And if you stay, you stay. You don't, you don't. But like the personnel management of that, it's like you got to be like anxious as hell all day.
Well, picture you're a head coach, right? And you have a superstar linebacker or pass rusher, let's say, right? And somebody comes up to you, the strength coach goes, "Hey, Coach Allen, I'm hearing that so-and-so, it might be entering the portal." Okay. So that's super common. I bet you
real.
Every school, Alabama on down, is dealing with that, right? So as a coach, you got to go think about the work that just created. Okay, I gotta call the player. I gotta talk to him. If he answers, I need to recruit him to stay. If he doesn't answer, right, because he's, you know what I mean, has been advised to just step away and evaluate. So then I got to talk to his friends, and I got to maybe talk to his agent. I got to maybe talk to his dad or parents, whatever. Yeah. Like, you just created a whole day or 2 or a week's worth of work to see if your pass rusher's leaving.
Yeah.
Right. And then you got to talk to your collective guy to figure out, hey, if he's going to leave, who's he talking to? Okay, he's talking to them. What kind of, okay, they're going to offer him that. Can we make some calls? Like, and I'll jump, like, to maintain your current roster, not to get better, to stay where you were at. It's just like, you know, swimming upstream. Like, you got to paddle fast just to stay in the same spot. And again, that's 1/3 of your recruiting responsibilities, where you used to have one. Now you've got,
which was enough
the
already,
plus your team. Now you've got 3, but by the way, you have the same amount of time to do it. So there's a reason that if you talk to college coaches right now, they're trying to get into the NFL. And if you talk to NFL coaches who typically would go make more money if they go from a safeties coach to a defensive coordinator in college,
they don't want to touch it.
Like, they're like, I'm not doing it. I can't do that to my wife. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's think about it. Okay. So coaches around college football right now, teams around college football right now that have had their quarterbacks, their starting quarterbacks transfer out, right? The 2 that come to mind for me, and there's probably plenty more, is Ohio State. Kyle McCord started. They were 1 game away from being in the college football playoffs, right? Beat Michigan, win the Big Ten. You're in college football playoffs. And there's probably plenty more, but I don't know why, because we had him on the show last year.
Let me give you a couple. Tyler Van Dyke left Miami to go to Wisconsin. Yep. DJ Uiagalelei left Oregon State. He's in the portal right now. Curtis Rourke left Ohio. He just committed to Indiana. Giovanni McCoy just left an FCS school, Idaho. He's in the portal. Like, Malachi Nelson just left USC. I don't know that it wasn't guaranteed the starting job, but he was guaranteed an opportunity to compete for the starting job. And so Dante Moore just left UCLA. A bunch of people played at UCLA last year because of injuries and poor performance, but whatever. He's heading into his true sophomore year as a 5-star and just left and committed to Oregon today. Another player to Oregon. So and then I forgot about the other 26 dudes where that's happened. So sorry to hijack you, but yes, there's a lot of those examples.
Knew a lot more than me. Yeah.
Dylan Gabriel left Oklahoma to go to Oregon.
Oh, so they both went to Oregon? Dylan Gabriel and the UCLA kid went to Oregon? See, that's okay. That's a whole other issue.
Make it a little spicier. Yeah.
Just unbelievable, right? And that's been happening for a while, but it's just, there's so many more names in the portal, right? So, okay. So we go from the coach's point of view, which is messy as hell. Coaching in college football is messy already. And then you add all this in. I don't even know how they have time to see their kids or their families. So let's shift gears to the player point of view, right? the point of view that we've been used to from a recruiting perspective, and recruiting's changed over the years. But I mean, I transferred in college, you were recruited into college, but from a player's perspective, you look at these 5 weeks, right? And now players have the opportunity to sign early in January, right? There's an early signing date, and then there's also the normal signing date, right? So that early signing date falls in this 5-week period. If you're a guy like I was who graduated early to go play football, right? I graduated early out of high school to go play in college, so I would have a leg up in the spring. I could go through spring ball. I could go through summer practices, give me a better chance to start as a true freshman, develop more. So if you're a guy that's doing that, right, there's this 5-week period. Say you haven't decided. Most kids would, but it would affect you even more if you already had decided, right? There's 5 weeks right now where a guy from another school, someone who could have started somewhere and played well, transfers into your school, right? Now there's also another high school kid could sign in there. And so as you're a quarterback right now, especially the high school kid, as I'm thinking about it, how do you make an educated decision on where you're going to go? And not to mention coaches leaving too. Like it just, there's no process in my head that I can get this done.
I mean, you and I've talked about this, but like I remember I was at an Elite 11 regional at Ohio State when you called me as a high school kid. Mm-hmm. So for those of you guys who don't know, Kyle and I have been buddies forever, but I've been training him since he was in high school. And you had narrowed it down to UCLA, Tennessee, Texas A&M, and Notre Dame, I think.
Country. Yeah.
Right. So you narrowed it down to 4, top recruit in the country, narrowed down to 4 schools. And I had given you advice to, write down everything that you want to get from your college experience and then only look at those schools through the lens of what do they represent for those things. Don't do pros and cons lists for each. You'll have 50 data points. It'll just make it more confusing, and confusion leads to an emotional decision. And we don't want to make emotional decisions when it's a life pivotal moment in our life. So now my advice has totally changed for Elite 11 guys. I'll say Elite 11. I mean, the top kids in the country who go, hey, what should I do here?
Right.
Now I've, to this date, never told somebody where to go, or if I were you, I would go to that school, right? Because I think part of becoming a man is making these decisions on your own, and living with the results of a bad decision. And I've had plenty of guys make a decision that I disagreed with, but I let them. And so, disclaimer that I don't tell people where to go. But what I tell guys now is only look at your choices through the lens of development, which means if you've narrowed it down to 3 schools, if you're a big time recruit with a bunch of offers, they're going to talk about playing time. They're going to talk about money. They're going to talk about their system. They're going to show you their weight room and their locker room and how many people can fit in the cold tub and all the dumb shit. Look at it through the lens of development. So your question should be, if I redshirt, walk me through a weekly schedule of what I'm going to do strictly to develop. So don't mention I'm going to be in this lifting group. Everyone's doing that. What are you doing to get me better? What resources do you have? What cool technology do you have? How do you do reps for bowl practices? How does spring ball work? How many how am I going to get better? Because you have to be somewhat selfish here. If I'm going to pick this school and there's there's a big time chance that I don't end up playing there and I end up in the portal and I've got options and I can transfer multiple times, then I don't just want to come and get all the cool swag and be a part of whatever your school is if I'm not actually developing, whether that's to play here or to play elsewhere. So everything needs to be looked at. Like if I walk outside right now and it's sunny and I'm squinting and I put on sunglasses, that lens changes my entire perspective. I don't squint anymore. So put the development lens on, and I would be grilling school. And a lot of guys do this now. When I tell them to do this, grill the school on what are you doing to get me better above and beyond what the rest of the team is doing. And it's not shocking to me, but it'd be shocking to fans how bad those answers are and how limited the answer. They'll say things like, well, in the weight room with quarterbacks, we don't do overhead presses because that's not good for throwers. Okay, you just mentioned something that I'm not going to do. Okay, tell me something I'm going to do.
Yeah, well, this goes back to the coaching perspective too, and it's another question I want to pose to you, but it's they have all this other shit to do now, right? How does that affect the development of the player? How does that affect their time to be able to put these plans together, be intentional about what they're doing, and actually spend time and develop their player when they have so many other things that they need to worry about?
Yeah. Well, for my business personally, and you and I've talked about this, to some extent, I would say last year I worked with, whether it was for a weekend or the entire year or just the off season, I call it 50 clients, 50 to 60 guys. I'm not counting camps and stuff like that and a bunch of kids at it. One way or another, or on an annual program. This year, I've got 21 spots. That's it. I'm working with 21 players, half college, half NFL, and a couple of young guys, and that's it. And it's a year-long program, and that's what we're doing, because what you just said, there's not. It's not. I'm not blaming the coaches. They're not bad coaches all of a sudden. They're the same or better than they were. What problem is if I draw a pie chart right now, and then in that pie chart, let's say it's an offensive coordinator in college who also coaches the quarterbacks. That's very common. Okay. If I draw a pie chart and I have him write in and put the percentage and remove family and remove fun, just work. Okay. That work pie chart. And I say, fill in the pie chart with the appropriate percentage for each of the following. And it's recruiting, it's media, it's developing quarterbacks on the field, developing quarterbacks in the classroom, right? So it's not just loosely working with quarterbacks, but how much on the field, how much in the classroom. There's, just like fundraising. There's just events you got to go to. You also have to install an offense. You also have to watch a bunch of tape and figure out what you're going to run this year. You're going to tweak your offense. You're going to steal some things.
All the important things, right? Like all that other stuff that actually matters.
You're going to figure out who's going to be our guard on the right side this year. We got 2 guys. We got a problem. We got to solve. So all that pie chart. And then I add in working on developing your quarterback's mechanics, and not your quarterback, your quarterbacks, the whole room. Like in the NFL, there's 2 or 3 guys on the sideline. In college, there's like 7. Okay. That sliver of develop my quarterbacks, when you look at that pie chart, if they're being real honest, it ends up being a tiny little sliver, because, oh, by the way, legally, they've only got 20 hours a week to even work with the players. You can't just head out on the field I did in college, but like, you can't just head out on the field and get a throwing session in with your coach. It's illegal. And so they're handcuffed. It's not an indictment on the coaches. They're handcuffed by the rules, and the rules are set up for a good reason. But what ends up happening is you've got quarterbacks who have been in a program for 2 or 3 years. They haven't really played yet. They stand in the back of the line. They only get the meaningless reps at the end of practice. They throw on their own. They work with some private guy on the side, and all of a sudden they're like a junior, and they're either not good, or they don't even know if they're good or not yet, because they haven't played and they haven't done anything, and they haven't been developed. And that's not a small school problem or only on the East Coast. That is from the top programs down.
Which in turn leads them to want to leave and transfer and think the grass is greener in other places. And for any high school quarterback that's watching this or listening to this, or anybody in general, you think about that pie chart, right? And that little sliver is developing quarterbacks mechanics. And there's also only a small amount of quarterback coaches or offensive coordinators in college football who are actually good at developing that part of the game, right? There's a lot of good offensive minds. There's a lot of guys who can scheme up plays. There's a lot of that. But if you're a guy that's going somewhere and you're looking for a place to go and become a great quarterback, I think that's an extremely important question. I'm sure you can tell your guys to do that. But from a mechanical standpoint, how are you going to develop me? I guarantee you there's a lot of guys who don't have an answer ready for that. And they need to have one ready for that.
I kind of say that everybody's all in on no plan. So they go in the weight room and they bust their ass. And they go in the film room and they study and they prepare and they're ready for it. And then they go in the practice field and they bust their ass. They do everything they can. And then they go home in the offseason, they train with their private guy. It's just that none of it's coordinated or synced.
Right.
So I say you're all in on no plan, meaning you're just going to bust your ass on what the coach asks you to do. But by the way, the strength coach has his own agenda, and I'm not saying it in a bad way. Like, no, him and his staff are responsible for 100 dudes, and to get everybody's, to move up a rack and to lose 4% body fat and to get the numbers up. So that he's judged and scored on his job off of something that has nothing to do specifically to the quarterback position.
Right.
The training room, players in college and a lot of pros only go in the training room when they're hurt. And then when they're not hurt, they don't go in the training room. But I don't know. The guys I work with do PT every day or 3 days a week to address, to get out in front of things. Right. And then you go with your private guy, and that they never talk to the current coach. And so none of that stuff's implemented. So go work on it all off season and then show up, and it's either different than what the coach says or not reinforced. Either way, it goes away. And so again, for what I'm doing, I'm signing guys to annual retainers, and the collective, if it's a college player, the collective's picking up the tab on it. It's all legal. And it's a way for the coaches to essentially outsource the development from a movement and throwing perspective. And I think, I don't know what the solve is for quarterbacks as a whole. I know the solve is for my clients, and that's what I'm doing. And this is early in this part of the business, but it's trending upward because the problem persists. And even when you look at bowl games, right?
Exactly.
There's players who enter the portal before the bowl game and miss out on all those reps and all that practice. But that's a tough call. And I've advised
I
guys
was
on
one
that.
of those players too. I was one of them. And I think when you're a young kid, right? When I transferred,
We'll tell them. So you transferred, you went to A&M.
Yes. So I was at A&M. I played games true freshman year, played a bunch of games my sophomore year. And you're a young kid, you make rash decisions. I'm not playing, this guy's playing, I'm getting benched, now I'm playing again, blah, blah. Like, I'm sure a lot of people know the story. Me and Kyler Murray transferred at the same time, right? And we decided to transfer before the bowl season. And what a lot of people don't understand is when the college football season's over, right? Whatever that is, that was like a week or two ago. And if you make a bowl game, the biggest part about making a bowl game for coaches, especially players, are just like, oh, I got to hang around now. I don't get to go home and hang out with my high school friends. The biggest part about getting a bowl game is you get like 14 extra practices. And so those practices aren't like, you're not using 14 practices to prep to play Liberty in the Fiesta Bowl. You're using those, probably 6 or 7 of those, to be like, all right, let's develop these guys. Let's see what some of these other guys have. Let's give these other guys a chance who haven't really been getting reps. They've been on the other field all year doing scout team, running other people's plays. Let's give these guys some time to develop. So that's a huge part of my game that I missed. And also, when I went home, I was hanging out with my high school buddies and, drinking beers and doing stupid, like, I declined. And I'm sure, some guys might have a better plan than me, but that's also stuff that a lot of guys do. And so that goes back to the scheduling issue, though, as well, right? You have the opportunity to transfer during that time. And so your thoughts on development during that time, I know your main thought is on development in general is reps over everything, right?
Yeah, I think here I'm a quarterback coach who does off-season training, and yet I still think the best way you can get better is by playing in practice, playing. And also, like, when I've got guys who are like, hey, all right, here's my schedule, college guy, and they're like, I think I can come out like these 6 weekends. I'm like, okay, great. Let's pick 2 or 3, but you need to be back with your teammates. You need to be going to dinner with those guys. You need to be running hills with those guys. Don't skip out on Friday workouts. Like, you need to be with your team. So I think the best ways to develop as a leader is to be with your team, not go to more seminars and hear great speeches. And the best way to get better is by playing in that system with and against your players, or with your players and against other players. If playing in a game is the best way to develop. And it's the same thing when there's a guys, you know how it is, dude, the Elite 11 every year, right? They stand up, Jaden Davis, I'm from here and I'm committed to Michigan, right? And then hi, I'm Isaac Wilson, I'm from Corner Canyon and I'm committed to Utah, right? Everyone stands up and says where they're committed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's always 1 or 2 or 3 schools where there's 2 kids at the Elite 11 committed to that school.
It's super awkward,
right? I mean, Sam Darnold and Ricky Town both committed to USC, right? So that always happens, and it's awkward, whatever. But the reality is like, I'm not saying shun away from competition and I don't want to go somewhere if that guy's going here. I'm just saying, like, everyone's so caught up on, I got a bunch of offers from all these schools. You need to look at this honestly if you can play there, because it might be better to go down a level and go to University of Houston and start 4 years, or go to Cincinnati and start 4 years, right? And play right away if you're ready to play. And so I think if people get so caught up, and now money-wise too, they get so caught up in getting to a specific level, and maybe they don't have the resources to tell, but I can usually watch and I go, well, that guy's going to transfer. Those 5 guys right there, those guys are they're committed to there. Oh, yeah, they're transferring. And I don't even know who's on the roster. I'm just saying, no, that's probably a lower level player and he could develop into a great player, but he shouldn't go there and sit 3 years or sit 2 years and transfer to a place that he could have gone in the first place.
Got to play.
Makes sense? It's like Kyle McCord, right? Leave Ohio State, go to Syracuse. Everyone's going to give him shit for it. Maybe he should have gone to a Syracuse out of high school, even though he had big offers. And this would be year 3 and maybe his NFL year. Right. And so it's all hindsight looking back and all that. But the reality is, again, problem number 1 to stay on task here is the scheduling issue. So many things happen at one time, and the development of your quarterback, because of the importance of all of those things, it just ends up at the bottom of the totem pole or the tiny sliver of the piece of pie. It just does. And that's if that school is even good at developing quarterbacks.
Yeah.
The second main thing we want to hit, again, college football has a quarterback problem. Right? We're sounding the alarm here. Guys don't stay. So there's a study by The Athletic. Okay. If a top 50 ranked quarterback does not play a snap in his first 2 years, okay, so if he doesn't play in his first 2 years, there's an 87% chance that he transfers. That's just historical data. Cool. 87% of dudes who are ranked in the top 50, not scrubs like me with one offer.
Not even
guys
like
you.
top 50, like not even top 10, like top 50. Top 50 is crazy.
It's crazy. If they don't play, they're out in 2 years. And so I'll throw it to you, Kyle. Like, what's your reaction to that staggering number? That's damn near an A- if this is a math test, right? That's like the overwhelming majority of them dip if they don't play right away. And that's way different than it was a decade ago and 20 years ago.
Well, the main thing I think about when I hear that is it's kind of like the opposite thing, but it's also exactly the same. It's kind of similar to a quarterback not performing early in his career, right? So say you're a young guy that's get drafted in the NFL, you're playing early, a la Zach Wilson, right? You don't perform well earlier in your career, you get written off early, right? So this mindset of like things need to happen now and they need to happen well now and they need to continue to happen well, right? You kind of flip that if you're a young top recruit, right? What have you been told your whole high school career? You're the best. You're awesome. Come to my school. When you get recruited to these schools, you're so good, blah, 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 blah. You're going to be amazing here. We're going to win championships with you, right? They just butter you up the whole time. And then when you get there and you sit for 2 years, right? The whole expectation from coaches and from yourself is I need to perform early and I need to perform well now. And so if you don't play your first 2 years, you're thinking to yourself, man, maybe I'm not good enough here. Maybe they don't like me here. Maybe I'm not supposed to be here. They've probably already overlooked me because if a guy doesn't play good in a couple games, what if I go in after my third year here, after being here for so long and taking so many reps in practice, they've already know who I am. If I don't play well in my first couple games, maybe I'm out, right? And so when I think about that, I think it honestly makes sense to me. And it's a issue, but it makes sense to me because the expectation isn't that guys are going to sit and develop. The expectation is that when I go into my if I'm there for 2 years and I go into my third year and it's my time to play, oh, we're just going to get so-and-so from Ohio State. He's going to come play this year, actually, you know? And so what's the point of staying somewhere for more than 2 years?
Yeah. Just picture too. I mean, there's quarterbacks all over the country right when the season ends, whether their coach is staying or their coach is leaving, coach is getting fired, coach is going to another job, who all they're probably talking about is, are we going to get a transfer? Are we going to get a transfer? Right? So like the quarterback is a senior, he leaves, and you got a redshirt freshman and a redshirt sophomore, and they've been promised the world and all that stuff. The season ends. Like that's all they're talking about. Are we going to get a transfer? Are we anybody in the portal? Did you read anything? They're like, they're probably sitting there just refreshing, trying to see like, is there any news on it? Is it leaked? I'm talking to this guy. I'm talking to the director of football ops. Have you heard?
Well, now all these kids have agents too, right? They're probably in contact with everyone's agents, you know?
Yeah.
Like, hey, what's he thinking? Is he going to stay? Like, is he thinking he wants to leave? And there's probably a lot of tampering. Like, hey, if he wants to leave, we'd love to have, like, probably a lot of tampering.
I'll leave it at this, but there's lots of tampering going on.
Yeah.
I get a lot of phone calls where I go, sorry, I can't help you, Mr. So-and-so from whatever school. I'm not in that game.
You know what also comes to mind too with this stuff is these schools, the top schools that have great collectives who have raised money for this. I guarantee that they have a budget for a top quarterback every year at the end of the year, right? We need this in our collective. I need at least $1.5 million every single offseason to sign a top guy if we need one.
Yeah.
And that's in the budget. And so that goes back to the point of like, if you're a top 50 quarterback who signed there and you haven't played in 2 years, why would you stay there? Also, you got a chance to make money somewhere else.
Yeah. So let me flip this on it too. So in terms of guys not staying and the position that it put, so we've kind of said coaches are handcuffed, and coaches need, I think there's an opportunity for coaching to evolve and get better as well. But the other side of this thing is that if you look at this year or the last couple of years versus 10 years ago versus 20 years ago, high school quarterbacks coming out are just so much more advanced than they were in the past. So the kids coming out of high school now, it's the amount of 7-on-7, the amount of like good, you know, even if a guy, like the amount of good private quarterback coaching around the country, and in other countries.
Right. Yeah.
And I'll just say this, let's say that there's a private quarterback coach who's like not very good. And like you went and threw with him one time and you're like, this guy's no idea what he's talking about.
You'd be
if
pissed.
He just has cones and hurdles and just like has them do the same thing over and over again, like that's better than nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And so like I see shit on Instagram all the time. And I'm like, you know, Mike will send me like, check out this drill. This guy's got his kids in an arm sling trying to keep the front side closed or like doing it wrong. My point is always like, yeah, but that's better than nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so like that 7-on-7, I mean, I see, Ford plays flag and there's like the 6th graders are playing over there and like there's kids ripping back shoulders. We got smoked this year in 1st and 2nd grade flag because they kept like doing RPOs. You know what I mean?
Back shoulder until like junior year of high school. I didn't even know what that meant.
We didn't throw him until college or until I missed behind the guy, right? And he adjusted great. So like 10 years ago, that wasn't the case, right? And then 20 years ago. So part of this too is high school quarterbacks as a whole, I'm not isolating anybody here. Like it's just a more developed, more advanced position. And I mean, I got an online community, you know what I mean? And I don't think I'm the only one of like drills and videos, the democratization of education. I mean, you can go on YouTube. I mean, we had Tyson Bagent on, who has played for the Chicago Bears this year and played well this year, who straight up told us he's from a middle of nowhere, West Virginia, that he learned how to throw on YouTube. Like, well, we didn't have the internet when I was in high school, so we didn't have YouTube, and we damn sure didn't have high school, throwing videos. So I think the position is so much more advanced that it allows coaching to be a little more lazy because I don't have to. But unfortunately, what it does is it goes, all right, this kid's really good. He's a whatever star, and these are his stats, and this is how big he is, and all this. When he comes to this school, all they have time to do is teach him the offense, not how to build consistent movement patterns, how to repeat these patterns, how to put yourself in a position to have success. And so you can't get to that. And so either the guy does it or he doesn't, and you move on from him. And it happens really, really quickly. Mm-hmm. And you made the point that it's like this in the NFL too, in terms of you don't have a 5-year window to prove that you're the guy.
Well, you
have some cases a 1 year.
If you're in the NFL and you're not, there's no time to develop at this point, right? And so that goes back to developing yourself in college, right? That goes back to our original point of what you were saying, of what you tell high school guys, right? Like you need to find someone that's going to develop you. And I think what also you were saying about guys coming out of high school way more developed, more reps, more experience doing all these things is when you get to college. And what I was saying earlier, when you get to college and you're not performing right away and you're not practicing and you're not playing and you're not getting playing time on the field, like you're just so much more antsy. Like things need to happen now for you. And that's just the way football is nowadays. If things aren't happening now, people make changes. And that's in all positions. That's at GM, that's at head coach. The Panthers fired their head coach in the middle of the year in his first season. That's never happened before in the NFL. And so I think it kind of all comes back to like what's happening now.
Urban Meyer. It did.
Oh, did he?
But
different situation.
Separate issue. Yeah.
Much different issue.
Well, and then let's make it even harder for the quarterbacks to succeed. And you know this, and I've ridden sidecar with you on this. This is something you've gotten way better at where now it's not an issue, but it was an issue. It's an issue for every young quarterback. When you only get the last 2 reps of this period and the last 3 reps of this period and the last 3 reps of that period. So you only got, 6 reps today or 9 reps today. Quarterbacks get in those situations and they feel like they got to throw a touchdown or make a play. And the reality is the flat route might have just been open and you got to do that. Or a young Kyle Allen, that was conversations we had. Hey, because I always tell guys this, I go, because for draft prep, right? Obviously, if I'm preparing something from the draft, they were a starting quarterback who got a shitload of reps. And then a lot of times it doesn't even matter if they go first round, they all of a sudden don't get reps. And that's a hard thing for guys to deal with. There's some pride elements to it, right? I've been the man and now I get like the 2 reps at the end with that guy, right? And the reality is I tell everybody, at the end, you're going to be evaluated. You're just a cut up of these 55 plays. And because in the moment you only had 2 reps, let me force it in there. If you do that and the ball keeps hitting the dirt or keeps hitting DBs, then your 55 play cut up is going to look like you struggle to not force the ball and try and make something happen. So just play it out. Well, that's easy for me to say to people. It's hard to do in the moment. So you got quarterbacks who were really talented and high school football was really easy. They go to college, don't get developed. Then they get a limited amount of reps, try and make a play. And all of a sudden the coaches don't really trust them because every time we put them in there, he tries to make a play.
So much easier to move on nowadays. It's just, you have so many more options as a coach to move on. And I think when I'm sitting here thinking about it and I'm like, all right, it's worked for a lot of people who have transferred, right? Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, first 2 people that come to mind, right? It works for a lot of people. And it doesn't work for the majority of the people. I think there's stats up here somewhere in here. 2021, guys who entered the portal, 798 guys who committed to new schools. 527, not just quarterbacks, players in total, 66%. 2022, 2,337
Well, real
people entered the
quick, for
portal.
those of you watching this, what's the other end of it? 34%? Is that what's left over?
Mm-hmm.
So 66% went on to a new school. So the 34% that's left over, by the way, I would bet the majority of those guys just ended up without a scholarship to college.
Exactly.
That they because if I'm a head coach and you're on my team, Kyle, and you're one of my players, and you enter the portal, just know if you enter that portal, deuces, you're out. So if you enter that portal and you don't have an opportunity, you ain't coming back here. So that 34% that's left over, and again, all players, that's not just quarterbacks. I bet a lot of those guys moved back in with their parents.
Yeah.
Like don't go to college anymore or are paying for college or went to
It's not
junior
talked
college.
about at all either. Yeah.
It's not talked about at all. And so that was that year.
Yeah. And then
you know
the
what
next
I mean?
year,
So amortize that over
2022,
10 years.
Yeah. Well, the next year, 2022, the number triples, right? It went from 800 to 2,400 people entering the portal and only 1,700 finding homes. So down in percentage, not 1,700, I'm sorry, only 1,500 finding homes. So down in percentage, down to 64%. And then a ton of more guys just because there's more volume. That's almost 1,000 guys not having a scholarship at the end of it, right? And so it goes back to the point of like when you're making these decisions, and a lot of these kids, and I was in this position when I made a decision to transfer too. I was 18 years old. I felt like it was the right decision. But you don't know at this point. You got to sit down and really think about, all right, this is my life. This is my future. This is a huge pivotal decision in your life. It changes so many things about you. Like you're entering the portal. You might not have a scholarship. You might not end up somewhere. Or you might end up somewhere that when I entered the portal, right, I was the number one quarterback in high school, right? Could have gone anywhere. Went to A&M. When I entered the portal, I had 2 schools call me. Mm-hmm. 2. And that's before anyone was, I was like, there was like 3 guys, quarterbacks transferring that year that had any type of shit to them, right?
Yeah.
Think about it now when there's 100 plus quarterbacks in the portal.
Yeah. And I think there's 3 types of quarterbacks in the portal right now. There's guys where it didn't go the way that I thought it was going to go as a player at the last place, right? And so I got 1 more year, or I got 2 more years. I got to make this thing work. I got to fix it. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then you got guys who just straight haven't played yet, who I need to go somewhere where they value me and I get an opportunity to play. And then you got guys who it's gone really well, but let me go ahead and test this and let me see if I can't just put an exclamation point on the end of this, right? So I'm not going to single out the first one, but like the last one, somebody where it's gone really well and now they're in the portal and they just want to see, I want to make sure that I can't just, instead of going to the league, I might just screw around and win a Heisman or a Natty somewhere. That's Cam Ward right now. He's played really well at Washington State. He would be drafted this year had he entered. He would have been drafted last year has he entered. But he's in the portal. Like, see him, he was at Miami and he's at Florida State. And I think he went to Ohio State. And look at that. Like, that's a good reason to be in the portal, right? DJ Uiagalelei is in the portal. He's going to go to his 3rd school and everyone's going to go, oh, he went to 3 schools. Well, hold on. He had a really good year at Oregon State last year. And the entire coaching staff, which is the reason he went there, he's a roomie. He was on our show a month ago and was raving about Jonathan Smith and the staff and how much football. Well, those guys got a better job opportunity. They left and went to Michigan State.
Because of him.
And so it's like, yeah, then you should dip. You should go somewhere else. So like, then that's kind of like the outsider, like the 4th kind of group of like, right. Yeah, you kind of had to go. I mean, you can't really stay here. It's not a good situation. You're not bailing on anybody. In fact, you were bailed on. And so you got to do what's best for yourself. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of, I think, who makes up the portal. And if you're a school, then the biggest schools who are in it are going for that last one, that Cam Ward one, the guy who can come in and be an exclamation point, Dylan Gabriel. Bo Nix just did that. If I think I'm just as good or better, I would assume Dylan thinks that, like any quarterback's confident. Well, then there's the blueprint, right? And so that makes sense.
Yeah, let's talk about guys transferring. Let's talk about guys transferring multiple times because I think that's really interesting. And over the past couple years since the portal's been a thing, I mean, it's all we talk about in quarterback rooms and when it comes to college right now, right? We sit on Twitter and our phones 5 minutes before meetings. Go, oh, did you see this guy went here? Did you see this guy left? And we talk about the coaches, right? And all these coaches every year, no matter if you're looking for a quarterback or not, the quarterback coach, the offensive coordinator is going to break down all the guys coming out for the draft. And one of the biggest things that we've talked about over the years is the more schools you've transferred to. I was just having a conversation recently about this with one of my coaches. He was saying that, yeah, if a guy is transferred 3 times, like that's a big red flag for me going through the draft process, right? a lot of these times, these guys, they're going through all these guys. They don't have time to like, why did you transfer? Why did you do this? Blah, blah, blah. Like if you've transferred multiple times, I'm worried about like, why is it a teammate thing? Is it a coach thing? Is your development skewed because of that? Are you going to dip out when things go bad? Like it has an effect on you going to the next level. And from a development standpoint, a lot of them think that if you transfer multiple times, your development suffers heavily. What do you think about transferring, having many different coaching staff? It's similar to just your coaches leaving too and having a development issue.
Yeah.
Do you think it's similar in that way? Do you think guys who have been to multiple schools develop differently or worse?
I think context is relevant, and the DJ Uiagalelei is a perfect example. So you can go, oh, he's a 3 transfer guy. Well, hold on. Look at each individual transfer. Did that make sense? Was it selfish? Did he get ran out of the building by the coaching staff? Is it because he played like shit and he was pissed because they had a 5-star coming in? So you got context is relevant. Like I just said, when he left Oregon State to go into the portal, which he's in right now, that move makes total sense. Yeah, the whole staff and the reason you went there, it's not like he's from Oregon. The whole reason you went there, that is gone. And you have this rule where you can go play again somewhere else. So I think you should exercise that right. When he was at Clemson, they didn't have a great year. They didn't have a great year this year. And they had a new offensive coordinator coming in, and they had true freshman kid. Everyone's excited about Cade Klubnik, 5-star number 1 recruit coming in. So and DJ has a great reputation. Everybody loved him at Clemson. He's a great teammate, all that. So there's a guy who's a 3 transfer guy, and I go, yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine with it. I don't see any issue at all. Right. It makes sense to me. JT Daniels just retired. Shout out to JT Daniels. He's a roomie as well. We've known him since he was a little guy. And he went to 4 schools. So he's the first guy. He will not be the last guy, but he's the first guy to go to 4 schools. Well, if you look at each individual transfer, he played well as a true freshman at USC. He tears his ACL second quarter of the first game of his true sophomore year and enters Keaton Slovis, true freshman, who has a great year. Well, they're like chanting Keaton's name at the end of every game. So like, yeah, that makes sense. So he goes to Georgia. He's 9-0 at Georgia. He's balling, has a non-contact injury, pulls his oblique, tears his lat on the other side. It's an issue. Insert Stetson Bennett. We all know that story. Mm-hmm. He asks, like, is it open competition after the first natty? And Kirby says, no, it's not. I'm going to go with Stetson. Okay. So then you got to transfer, right? Goes to West Virginia, right? Chooses to go there. It's a good situation. They're like 6th in the country on offense. Whatever, it's a long story, but like the head coach is a defensive guy, really wants to start running the ball, and they end up getting the fast runner in there, and everyone's talking about leaving, and everyone's going to transfer out, and it's like, all right, I got 1 more year, and Rice is like, all right, we're going to run a pro-style system, we'll build it around you, you can do all the things you love to do from a quarterback perspective. He did. He had a really good year until he got hurt. And it's like, I look at the context is relevant. I look at each one of those individual decisions. I go, he didn't get kicked off the team, didn't get ran out by the locker room, didn't just go chase money somewhere else, leave a good starting spot just to go make more money somewhere else. That's not what happened. And so I just think when you look at those, context is relevant. For example, I like DJ's 2 decisions to leave. Mm-hmm. So he's going to be next year at the draft, he's going to be a 3 transfer guy. I will say I'll take that. I like those 3 reasons to transfer more than some other guys who are going to be in the draft who only transferred once.
Yes.
But it was a dumb decision to transfer, or they just did it for money, or they just did it for something stupid. And so it's like,
but you also can't hate on a guy doing it for money though. You know, I think there's double standards, and I was talking about it today, right? You look at coaches get celebrated. The Oregon State coaches get celebrated when they go to Michigan State for a huge contract. But then you got a guy who played 3 years at this school, a smaller school, plays great, does a lot of great things for the school, and then he gets an offer for $2 million to go play at the school at 18 or 19 or 20, and he gets dogged on. Like the double standards are unbelievable. And then coaches of the NFL are going to say the same thing, right? Wow, you left for money, you left for $2 million. Well, what happens when you come to free agency and someone like the double standards in college football are just beyond me to that point.
Yeah.
But one more thing on people leaving, and then we'll move on to the next point. But Joel Klatt had another, once again, we love Joel Klatt. He had another really good point on how to get people to say, what's the solution, right? I think we've talked a lot about the problems. I'm not saying we have a ton of solutions for it. It's more of just the state of the union. But he had an interesting solution on how to get guys to stay and develop for a little bit, at least. And his solution was, if you're signing out of high school, you have to commit to a certain amount of time at that school, right? Whether that be 18 months, whether that be, like 2 seasons, right? An off season, like you get there as a freshman, it's a season, a full off season, then another season, right? And you got to commit to that amount of time. And that solves the problem for Malachi Nelson and all these young guys who, it's not what they told me in recruiting, right? Like kids got to get over that. Like they're going to tell you all the things you want to hear in recruiting. And then when you get there, it's not going to be the same. It's not what they told me. What do you think about that idea of guys having to sign contracts to stay there for at least a year or two?
I like it. And it's going to put the onus, again, I'm giving a lot of guys this advice, and I think hopefully this spreads like wildfire, but like when you're being recruited, ask them what their development plan is. Of course, they can lie to you and end up not doing what they said they were going to do, but at least ask the questions over and over again to everybody there. What are you going to do to develop me? All right, if I'm signing this contract for the next 2 years to commit to you, what is your commitment to me besides food, a bunch of gear, shoes, a locker, and an education? Like, what is your commitment to me to get me better? Not to guarantee me playing time. Just what is your commitment to me to be able to develop, and what does that look like? And so if I think that the programs that solve for that, and I'm consulting with a couple of them who are actively trying to solve for the development issues that they're aware of, those schools are going to continue to get good quarterbacks strictly because it's appealing to the parents, it's appealing to the player, it's appealing to those who are advising the player that this place is going to get you better whether you're playing or not. But I think it's a good point. And I think Joel sees this super clearly, being a former player, current analyst. And when you're an analyst like that, you don't just show up to the game and talk. You're in it. You're talking to everybody, different school every weekend. So I've called games, but when you call it the level that Joel calls it with Fox, these big time games, big time schools, like, where all the bodies are buried and you understand what everything's happening. So for any of you guys who are like, man, they keep saying Joel Klatt, I don't like Joel Klatt, or I don't like Dan Orlovsky, or I don't like any of these people. When you call games, you get visibility into everything that's happening, some of which you can talk about on air, most of which you can't. So when people like Joel or a coach, says something about how things ought to be done, I'm usually listening.
I agree. Let's move on to one of the last points, and probably the most important point in my opinion, and the one I'm most passionate about, and has nothing to do with quarterbacks leaving, nothing to do with quarterbacks transferring, nothing to do with NIL. It's all about the coaching instability issue in college football. And we've talked about it a bunch already, but I think talking about it from strictly a personal development lens, and how hard it is, especially for these guys who have the coaches who have had success, right? Let's take Penn State, for example. Since James Franklin has been at Penn State since 2014, he's had 6 different offensive coordinators. Sean Clifford, who played there, who was a roomie as well, had 4 different offensive coordinators when he was there, right? And the knock on Sean was always like, oh, he turns the ball over too much. He's too erratic out there, blah, blah. The guy had, I don't know if they had 4 different systems, but he had to learn under 4 different guys, right? So the development is maybe one year he's like, ooh, I really like this guy. We get along well. He's teaching me well. Oh, he got a head job here. Let's go back down here. I'm not really vibing with him. Boom, boom. Turn the ball over a lot this year. Oh, I got a great OC, right? And it's not your decision either. And so this happens everywhere, right? I played for 3 offensive coordinators. And it goes
both ways, right? Like when the team struggles on offense, the offensive coordinator is the first guy to get fired. And when the team's rolling on offense, usually it's the offensive coordinator who gets the head job somewhere else. So it might be because I think one of his coordinators was fired and 2 other guys got promoted and got head coaching jobs somewhere else. So it's like it goes both ways.
Yeah, 100% goes both ways. And I remember your story in college, UTSA, right? When you got to UTSA.
UTEP, bro.
Oh, that was fucked. I knew that was wrong when I said it. I was like, UTSA is bad.
Hey, if everything goes well, we will be competing with a UTSA down the road.
There we go. My bad. Shout out to the Miners. That's on me. But when you got to UTEP, right? And this is no knock on you, but you didn't have many offers coming out. And when you got to UTEP was your only offer, right? So you're going to play ball there. You're running like triple option your first year, right? Yep. Some crazy system where
36 freeze option. Yeah. Under Gary Nord, heavy play action. We're going to work that tight end. When we drop back and throw, we're going to work that tight end. And that works at a different era.
Yeah. Okay? And you're a 6'5", 240 going to Tucson every weekend to drink beers, Like, what are you doing running triple option over there?
Exactly.
But then this is something that worked out in your favor, right? You get a new OC the next year or whatever year it was.
They fired the coach after my redshirt freshman year. We had back-to-back 1-win seasons. Insert Mike Price after the whole Alabama thing. The resurgence for him. able to rebrand himself, redo everything. Both his sons were coaches. One was a coordinator, one was a QB coach. Those guys are like my two best friends in college. And poof, turned that thing on real quick, filled that stadium up, started scoring 40 a game, had a blast. Didn't win any championships. I didn't win any accolades or awards, but at that level played really good ball, and it changed everything. Had there been a transfer portal, one, I would have definitely transferred. I would have waited to see who the coach was. And then the other interesting one is, my redshirt sophomore year, we kind of went nuts and won a bunch of games and put up a bunch of points. Like, it would have been interesting if somebody would have offered me, because UTEP doesn't have money like that. It would have been interesting if somebody would offer me $500 to $1 million, $500,000 to $1 million to go play the school that I would have wanted to go to out of high school.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Or if all of a sudden my first team All-American best friend, Johnny Lee Higgins Jr., who I threw it to every play, got paid to go somewhere else, if I would have gone, well, is this place still the same place without Johnny Lee, Chris Morrow, and Cecil? Right? You start plucking my wideouts to go play for real money. And so I have played that out in my head of like, man, how interesting would that have been?
Well, what would you have done?
A conclusion.
Say you got $500,000 to go to Oklahoma. What would you have done?
I think it would have been, I loved my coaching staff and I loved what we built there. I have such a positive, I hated UTEP when I got there, and I had just like, I just had such a blast living there, playing there, the people, the city. So it's hard for me. I'm not disgruntled about anything. So it's hard for me to look back on it and going, I would have left.
No doubt.
But we would have been an interesting package deal considering we're all the same age. Like, and we all just finished a sophomore year and got 2 to play and just like, put up big numbers.
You would have had to been part of a package deal though.
It would have been an interesting deal because it was like the 4 of us were best friends. You know what I mean? It was like 7-on-7 on game day. And it would have been interesting if somebody would have said, hey, here's a package. And it would have been a rad place that I really wanted to go to. Like I really wanted to go to Texas.
So what years did you go to UTEP? What years did you go?
03 to 07.
What do you think your number back then would have been to go to Texas?
In today's terms?
No, in those terms back then.
I don't even know how to answer that.
Like what would someone have had to put in front of you to say, here's this amount of money to come play quarterback at Texas?
I would have only done it with my guys.
You and the dream team. I don't know what they're getting, but I know what you're getting.
I'd have taken my center, Robbie Felix, with me too.
Okay, stop dancing around the question here.
I don't know. I didn't like. I don't know. I don't know how I was thinking at that point. I know I didn't like at that point. I wasn't like thinking I was going to the league. So it would have had to been a big number because I didn't really care about money like that then. You know,
but it's just funny. It's just funny to hear.
Like I was a college student. I used my dad's
no doubt like back
gas
then,
card that he gave me for gas. Like that's what I bought
Yeah.
beer with. Like I was, my brother would send me like $500 and I'd take the guys out and we'd like get sushi. Like because my brother was making money in the league, and so like I don't know. I just didn't like care about it like that. I don't know.
I know.
I wish
but
I had a cool answer, but
think about it from this perspective, right? No, I don't think it would have been $1 million because guys nowadays, like they have these concrete numbers in front of them, right? Like here's what so-and-so got, like here's what so-and-so got. I'm kind of in the middle right here. This is what I think I should get. I'm just like back then in whatever you said. What year did you say? 92? 2002? 2002. 2002 at UTSA, no, at UTEP. I wonder what that number would have been. I was going to hope you said like 25 grand or something like that.
I definitely wouldn't have left for a small amount of money again because, like, it was a blast. And being a part of a turnaround is special too, right?
No doubt.
And then,
no, we get it.
Winning a championship is always important to a quarterback. Winning a championship when you've gone to Oklahoma, stood on the sidelines and lost 77-7 and only won 1 game that year, the chance at legitimately winning a championship is like super important. So I don't know. That's why I say, like, I've thought about it. I don't know. I don't know what I would have done.
Okay.
Back to coaching instability. Yeah. People leave because they get fired. People leave because they get promoted. Either way, you're left holding the bag as a quarterback, trying to salvage through it. And hopefully this new guy, and you do the research, and I don't know. And what's he going to run? Is he going to change so it's just a difficult thing. And it's another reason, again, DJ Uiagalelei, I think if Jonathan Smith was still there, I think there's a 0%. I don't know, but I think there's a 0% chance he's in the transfer portal. He's
Has he committed anywhere yet or no?
No, not that I saw. But again, like if nothing happened at Oregon State, I would assume that
no, he's there.
DJ's at Oregon State and getting ready for a big senior year.
I think he's one of the guys that when I come to mind of like who has used the transfer portal to their advantage the best, it's him, and it's a guy like Bo Nix. So let's start about from the player's perspective, right? I think it's the most important thing, right? At the end of the day, college football, I know a ton of people make a ton of money off of this. But at the end of the day, this is about a bunch of 18 to 22-year-olds trying to make a name for themselves, getting scholarships, going to school. One thing we haven't talked about this whole time is scholarships for school. We talked about a little, and then trying to make it to the NFL, right? So from a player perspective, let's start off going from high school to college, right? What's the process? What's the solution for a high school player to make the best decision possible going to college?
I mentioned it earlier. So look at everything through the lens of development. How good can I get? How fast can I get there? I tell quarterbacks that, you're typically in your developmental phase from whenever you start taking it serious. Some guys, that's not till high school. Some guys, it's in 6th grade, right? So when you start taking it serious, trying to get really good at it, okay? That's when your developmental phase starts. I think your developmental phase ends when you get your second contract in the NFL. And the reason I say that is I've just had a lot of rookies over time. You're backing one up right now in Josh Allen, who just because he became a Bill and was the 7th pick in the draft didn't mean he was done developing. There was things he had to get better at. Mm-hmm. He signed a contract after his 3rd year. Heading into that 4th year, I'm not saying that people don't have to get better, but he's not changing his throwing motion. He's not trying to do the footwork right now still, right? So I think most quarterbacks, that kind of ends there. A lot of guys, when I said it to them, they go, second contract, I'm a senior. And it's like, yeah, but everything should be looked at. Every decision should be made against how good can I get and how fast can I get that good, right? So I would make every decision for a high school guy going to college, whether you're deciding between 2 FCS schools or you're deciding between the top 40 colleges in the country and a bunch of money. Either way, you got to look at it through the lens of development and judge those schools and hold those schools accountable to not the amount of reps you're getting, but the amount of effort that they're putting into your development.
Okay, now go from college, you're a college quarterback and you're entering the transfer portal for whatever reason, right? We went over all the reasons. There's some good, some bad. But now you're entering it for whatever reason it is in this landscape. Best plan of action.
I think that you should look at everything through the lens of development. Your developmental phase starts at the beginning of high school. Then so I think it's the same thing, right? Is like, if you're transferring, it's for a reason, because you haven't played yet, because it hasn't gone well, or because you need an exclamation point year. Okay. Or your coaching staff left, or or everyone on your team transferred out. Right. So whatever the reason is, I need to take a level up and continue to develop, because what I can guarantee you is if you enter that portal and you don't really develop much, but you do put up bigger numbers, I don't think that's going to affect your draft stock. I just don't think it's going to make you get drafted higher.
Yeah, you're going to get exposed at some point anyways. I completely
agree. So it can't just be about stats. And I mean, I think we're on a little different sides of it. I think we see it probably the same, but like a little bit different when you made the comment about like, at the same time, you got to get paid, right? If somebody offers you a bunch of money, you got to take it. Again, after you look at it through the lens of development. So go here and don't develop at all and get $1 million, or go here and develop a ton and get $50,000. Well, if you're a guy who's actually an NFL guy, then I would turn down 950, that delta, for an opportunity to get drafted higher, because you'll solve that real quick.
100%.
And so I just think it's the same thing. It's where am I going to go to develop? And the advantage that you have in the portal versus coming out of high school is, in high school, you can get sold on the locker room and the alumni and the campus and the history and the school spirit. Like, you can get sold on those things, which aren't bad things, right? As tradition and things like that. Like, that's great. But when you're in the portal going to another spot, you don't care about the size of the cold tub and how brand new the squat racks are and how big the Jumbotron is. Like, you don't care about that shit, or the uniforms. Like, am I going to play? 2, what kind of system are you going to run? 3, who's running that system with me? 4, who's calling those plays? And can we win this thing? Right. And so I just think it's the lens of development, and then it's those things.
And I think going from college to the NFL is the same exact thing. And you don't have a choice going college to the NFL. But when you make that decision, right, am I developed enough at this point to be able to go to a spot and compete? And then at that point, you hope you go to a spot that continues to develop you, because I completely agree with your statement of those, like, your first 4 years in the NFL. I mean, to be honest, like, I'm in my 6th year, I'm still developing, right? I haven't had the playing time that starters have had to be able to have those reps and develop and become that player. But specifically for a top round pick or a guy who's going to be an early starter, we were 100% developing through your first 4 or 5 years. And I think that's something that fans who watch the game need to understand, because a guy like Carson, your brother, he sat his entire rookie year, right? He sat and developed. That's not a thing anymore, right? If you're a top 10 pick, you're playing 100%, or else people are going to start to think something's wrong with you, right?
Yeah.
And so we do it from the player's lens. Now,
and real quick, let me add another scenario. Do I leave college early and go to the NFL, or do I come back to this school? So forget the portal for a second. One of our best friends, Sam Darnold, had to make that decision. Everybody knew that Sam was going to leave after his redshirt sophomore year, the Suck for Sam campaign and all that. Like, everyone knew he was going to dip after his third year. But you and I know, you did draft prep with him at the time. He didn't make that decision until after they lost to Ohio State.
He didn't make that decision until 2 days before he came to draft prep. Like,
100%. And so what I tell those guys, and I have that conversation with 1 to 4 guys every offseason, helping them make the choice to, I'm getting drafted high. Do I go or do I stay? Mm-hmm. Guess what I tell them, Kyle? Look at everything through the lens of development. So Sam is a perfect example. Staying 1 more year, a 4th year. So he redshirted, and then he played his redshirt freshman year, went nuts, went to the Rose Bowl, beat Penn State, crazy game. And then his sophomore year had a great year and was the 3rd pick in the draft. Well, that choice wasn't, dude, I think you ought to bounce. Again, I don't tell kids where to go to school, and I don't tell guys what I would do if I were them. So what I told him is, look at it through the lens of development. Of literally, I can picture myself sitting in the living room, Chris, Mike, Sam, sitting there talking. And can you benefit from staying at USC for 1 more year, running the exact same system that you've been running, whatever percentage of that correlates to the NFL or not, with the same guys, maybe not quite as good receiver? Like, can you develop better there where you're getting every rep and it's all designed around you, or go to the NFL where you're either going to sit behind somebody or get a chance to play and thrown into it? So remove money for a second. Just look at it development.
Thrown into a bad situation, though. That's the only time.
Which you don't control, because we didn't know if he was going 100%. 1 to Cleveland, 2 to the Giants, 3 to the Jets, 7 to Buffalo, 10 to Arizona. We didn't know. And so when you go 6 to Indy, so when you look at that, it's through the lens of development. And that's, I'm a broken record. I say it all the time. I talk to parents all the time about this. And there's been high school kids, and there'll be another one coming up where I'm going to be in part of the conversation on, do you reclass, or do you play your senior year? JT Daniels was the first to just straight only go to high school for 3 years. But again, he's not the last. There's been others, and there will be others. Where can I develop from playing, beating up on these high school kids 1 more year, or is it better for me to go in redshirt, or better for me to go and play?
Yeah, well, I'm also an example of that too, in a totally different way, right? I had another year left in college to go back to UH or to go somewhere else, right? And in my opinion, I wasn't going to develop enough in college, right? Where I was at my college school, and the opportunities and options I had at that point were limited because I didn't play much that year. Was I going to develop enough in that, or was I going to develop more if I go and try and make a team and get on a practice squad and hopefully get better in that period of time? And that worked for me. But everyone's situation is different. So let's look at it from college football as an organization's lens, from a rules lens, from how to regulations, how do we make this better for everyone, easier for everyone, more regulated so coaches can make better decisions, players can make better decisions. We've talked about guys coming out of high school having to sign somewhat of a contract to stay at a school. What other rules or regulations do you think could be put into place that could help people have a better opportunity to succeed?
I'm going to plagiarize here. I love what Joel Klatt said about, when you sign with a school, you got to stay there for 2 years. There's absolutely going to be guys that get screwed. If, let's say, that it gets implemented, there'll be guys where you go, oh, dude, that sucks. He has to stay for a second year. For sure, that you can't make something that applies to every single person perfectly. The second one, and I think Joel Klatt said this too, you get 1 transfer, everybody. Now, just like anything medical, you can apply for because this happened or whatever. So the isolated individual incidents that are worthy of reconsideration, great, have that caveat there. But I like the 1 transfer rule. I think it keeps players more honest and makes them really have to make a good decision. It forces coaches to develop them more too. And then the third one I'm going to plagiarize is, I'm just going to throw this out there. The piece that Chip Kelly had the other day, 64 teams, this side, that side, play each other, one governing body, boom, 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 boom. I feel like that was his audition to be the commissioner of college football, like of that committee.
It was a good one,
be
too.
a good person for that. It was great. But I mean, you go through the comment section on all the places that video lives right now, and you're going to hear a lot of people going, Chip's onto something. That's smart. Ooh, that sounds dope. Never heard that before. That's crazy. So I haven't thought about it enough to say that's what we should do, but I have thought about it quite a bit since I saw the video, and I haven't come up with a reason why that shouldn't happen. So I think forcing guys to stay for 2 years, only allowing one transfer, again, there's going to be casualties. There's going to be people that get screwed by that. But as a whole, I think it would at least bring some of the integrity that we've lost through all the NIL stuff back into the game. And I think level the playing field, which is really what everybody wants. You have to have a healthy middle class in college football.
Yeah.
It can't just be a bunch of shitty teams and then the top 8 programs. It just can't. So you have to have a middle class. Part of the realignment on conferences, I think you're going to get a lot of really good's going to come from that. When USC and Michigan hate each other because they play each other every year, I think that's going to be a good thing for college football. All the cross-pollination from the different markets, different cities, the different schools. So I think there's a lot of good happening. First and foremost, I'm a proponent of dudes getting paid to play. They're creating revenue for other people that should be able to monetize it themselves. I think there's ways to clean it up so it's cleaner. Like Chip Kelly said, just put everybody on a salary. Just call it a day. I think evens it out.
I think you said it. It's cleaning it all up. It's a mess right now in college football.
Bring some integrity back into it.
Yeah, it's an absolute mess. But I also think like that it needs to get messy before it gets right. And I think for a while in college football, it wasn't right. And so you got to make some drastic changes. You got to, insert some things. You got to figure it out on the fly. And there's going to be a generation of college athletes and coaches who suffer because of it in this period. And some people have taken advantage of it. But in my opinion, most people have suffered from the transfer portal. And a lot of people have taken advantage of NIL. But I think for all this to happen, you need to suffer for a little bit and clean it up. And I think there is going to be solutions on the way, but I think there also needs to be people who are pushing for solutions and not waiting for someone to make it happen,
Well, let me just tell you the answers to the test right now. Here's what's going to happen, Kyle. College football bowls are going to happen. We're going to pay attention to some of them. People are going to not pay attention to a lot of them, played in some of those games. And then the college football playoff is going to happen, and it's going to be freaking awesome, right? There might be one blowout, but it's going to be freaking awesome. And then the offseason is going to hit, and everybody's going to bitch and complain about NIL and the transfer portal and this and that all the way up until August, and then training camp's going to start, and then next season's going to happen, and it's going to be awesome with the 12-team playoff, and everyone's going to not care anymore. So there you go. So for those of you who are like, oh my gosh, doomsday, college football's coming to an end. Nope. We just got a couple months of hearing people like us complain and vent and talk about it, and then next season rolls around.
Right back.
And the top 12 teams are going to get to duke it out in a real tournament, and it's going to be friggin' dope.
It's going to be awesome. I can't wait.
It's going to be awesome.
All right. Well,
UTSA,
I appreciate it.
Champs next year.
UTSA. They might make they might make it there. But I appreciate you guys. Let us know what you think of this. I think this is kind of a new format we're going to be getting into. And our whole thesis of creating the show was to give you guys the smartest conversation in quarterback, whether that be with NFL quarterbacks, top college quarterbacks, guys like Dan Orlovsky. Football runs around quarterback, and you're the CEO of the Fortune 500 company in the NFL. It's becoming that way in college football, and right now it's an absolute mess in college football. But to be honest, it's fun to watch it play out, and I'm excited to see how it plays out. So, like I said at the beginning of the episode, subscribe if you're not subscribed yet. If you're still here, you're a legend for listening to this whole episode. We went through a ton of crap. We tried to weed through it. We try to give you some solutions at the end. I don't know if they're going to work or not, but we appreciate you. No episode next week. We've got Christmas next week, but have a Merry Christmas. Thankful for all you guys. Thankful for you, Jordan. And we'll be back the week after with an episode. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Happy holidays.